Prabhatam, Hari Om, and good morning to all of you. Special greetings to all my fellow panelists. I do know some of you fairly well, but it's good to be on the panel with all of you. It's a great day, and I want a special thanks to our good friends Tejinder ji and Mahabir ji for taking the time to invite me and request me to do this. So. My focus would be to talk about the title that I chose, and I've decided against during doing the slideshow. I can share the slides later, but I thought it would be better to speak more in a in a more of a lecture format. But the idea that the title of my presentation that I made is "Awaken the Arjuna in You," because when we talk of Gita, we talk mostly from the standpoint of Sri Krishna. But I believe that unless you can see and you can visualize the Arjuna in you, and the Gita will not emerge. Gita emerged for the Arjuna. So I would take, I'm a marketer at heart. That's my training. I teach marketing. So rather than take a supply perspective, I'll take a demand perspective. And so our Gita came because Arjuna demanded answers. Gita came as a way to solve Arjuna's problems. So in marketing, we say there is no product, but there is always a solution to a problem. So to me, that is the lens I'm going to use. But I will also try to use some of the viewpoints that the speakers before me mentioned. That was very thought provoking, and it's a tough act to follow. If it's a tough act to follow any of these speakers, especially Kalyan or Professor Mahadevan, they are all my role models. So I don't know if I can do justice, but I will try. So with that, my personal background is that I teach marketing. I'm an engineer, an MBA, and then a PhD from in the US, and I've been a professor there for 15 years. I primarily teach marketing. I do not teach Gita or management. I mean, in fact, it was a lot of this interest was triggered by interaction with Kalyan Vishwanathan right now, whom we spoke a lot. We speak a lot even now on how do we take some of these concepts into executive education. And also, I've been watching a lot of videos of Professor Mahadevan. So you can say I'm like a Ekalavya Shishya, not an Arjuna Shishya, but an Ekalavya Shishya. So it's always an honor to follow him in this, and speak after him. So there's a lot of monumental work happening on the Gita, and a lot of I come from a very traditional background. I remember one of the youngest, as far as my memory serves, right? I remember attending one of the Gita lectures in Bangalore by Swami Chinmayananda at a very young age. I don't know what he spoke, but I remember this great man with a lot of energy, and that stuck my mind. That hey, the Gita must be fun. If somebody is speaking Gita is so fun, maybe that book is fun. And then I started reading books by Vivek and other traditions. When I came here to the US, I was more trained in an empirical tradition, positivist tradition. So I used to, I was trying to compare and contrast the Indian philosophy with the Western philosophy, and that's how I chanced upon. Can I request you all to mute the noise in the background? So. Yeah, so much like Kalyan, I also went into the teaching tradition of. I started learning from the teaching tradition of Swami Dayananda Saraswati and his Shishya Swami Paramarthananda and his Shishya Omkarananda, who I'm doing actually some Shastric training with Pujya Swamiji, and I'm also a student in the Kanchi Shankaracharya tradition. So this is how my traditional background informs my knowledge of the Gita. As I said, I don't teach Gita in my class. I teach in a Texan school, and I don't know how that would go, but maybe one of these days I would try. Professor Mahadevan rightly mentioned that it is, and again, by the way, I know he's a teacher who in primary discipline is operations management. So he's basically building algorithms for prediction and inventory control. And if he's saying he cannot predict anything, I'm sure none of us can. I'm also a marketer researcher by training. We are all trained in developing models for forecasting, but none of the forecasting models work. That's really what this year teaches us. Hindsight is 2020, but I don't know. 2020 is what is be the epitaph for this year when it is written. It's going to be a very all we can say is the world is topsy-turvy. None of us can plan. So when that happens, whenever, and then those of us who have dealt with the literature in supply chain management. Whenever there is all of these turbulence, we have to make the systems very resilient. We have to build resilience. So I think the post-COVID world, there will be focus on building resilience at a national level, at a systems level, at a governmental level, at a personal level, at an organizational level, at various levels. Resilience become part of it. And most of the times when we talk of resilience, especially in the literature, it's always about, do you have enough safety stock? Can you withstand the shocks to the system? But now I think resilience will start to take on a interpersonal dimension, which probably means there's going to be more focus on inward-looking issues, minds and all that, and a lot of these things, right or wrong, these have been covered whenever, even by the Prime Minister when he visits US. He has talked about concepts like yoga and Ayurveda making its way into the mainstream, and all that knowledge systems have essentially been taught in the Western universities using a universal perspective. But institutions like the Hindu University of America that Kalyanji is heading are now trying to change that narrative. But definitely, I think there'll be demand for programs that are going to train people to become more mindful, maybe using techniques like yoga, some emphasis on even Ayurveda and all that. So I think health will be the new wealth. Remember, these are conjectures; these are not predictions. I am not, as I know, I'm trying to not be a fortune. I'm trying to not look at the crystal ball, but this is coming out of my gut feel. So I believe, especially given there have been some evidence about how diet would have had an impact on the spread of the virus. This is not the first virus, by the way. There has been the SARS and the bird flu, avian flu, the mad cow disease, and there's been incidents with even meat eating and how that has a linkage with the virus. They talked about the virus coming, there has been incidences located to the meat markets, the wet markets. Again, none of this is fully empirically tested. So these are conjectures, but I think diet will start to make an important, and diet is something that is addressed in the Gita. I'm not going, and then I think hygiene, conduct, social distancing, social norms, social behaviors, those are going to be becoming very important. And again, we need to look at the Gita. What happens is after the Gita, you have the 18-day war, and there is massive destruction. And Vedavyasa talks extensively about how the Pandavas and guided by Sri Krishna start a process of rebuilding. So I think the post-COVID world, you need to rebuild at a national level, at a societal level. Maybe India is not as badly hurt because we had this resilience to begin with, but there will be recovery, economic recovery and rebuilding, and you need a lot of I think that is where the post-COVID world is going, and that's kind of the focus of the seminar. So I wanted to hazard a few predictions or in that direction. So coming to awakening the Arjuna in us. Who is Arjuna? And Arjuna is not somebody, the person who falls and sits on a chariot, who is very dejected, is not an ordinary person by any stretch, by any metric. He's a star performer. He is an expert in the Dhanurvidya, and he is an epitome of concentration. He's one of the greatest shishyas of Dronacharya. So he's not and he has got all the weapons. He has achieved them by his tapas to Lord Shiva and all that. There's a whole story. So remember, when we talk of Gita, we have to know the background of the Mahabharata. That's when it makes more sense. But so he's a fighter. And remember, the war here is not a war that people are doing it in a trigger-happy way. They're not just pressing the war button and say, hey, let's go war. There is a lot of parlays, there is a peace, there is diplomacy, and after everything fails, war is a last option. So in a case study, when we teach options, we debate all the options, and if all the options foreclose, we just have to go with the only option that remains, and in this case, in Mahabharata, the actors are taking on the war as one option to fight for, not for their kingdom, but for dharma. And so there's a larger context. So that is how we have to look at Arjuna. And so in that sense, and so how does Arjuna ask Krishna? And remember, Arjuna and Krishna again have a history of friendship. Arjuna, is supposed to have said, although he's married multiple times and all that, but on more occasions than one, he says, my best friend is Krishna. So it's not that these people are waking up one day on the war field and Arjuna is upset and Krishna doesn't start off. They've had a history of conversations, but Krishna never opens all this. He never goes into the psychological coaching. He never becomes a coach until this point, because Arjuna now approaches him as in the form of a shishya. Shishyasteham. That is the bhava. So you have to understand. So that is the first characteristic. You've decided a course of action. You have confusion, and you approach Gita not as a devotee alone, but as a shishya, sense of learning. That is important. That's why I said we have to awaken the inner Arjuna in us. And then, of course, we know the story, Arjuna, and it is said that Gita took 36 minutes, and Krishna just had one audience. So in some sense, we are all lucky that we have, I'm seeing about 180 people. So I'm certainly, by that metric, we are all very lucky. Krishna just had one audience. So I hope, we can inspire more Arjunas through this collective endeavor. But the point is, Gita was, I think, chanted in about 38 minutes or 40 minutes. That's the metric, and just one shishya. And then Arjuna is transformed, he fights, and of course, lo behold, the war is won and dharma is started again. So that is the philosophy. And now, when in my own quest as an Arjuna here, what did I encounter? I used to read, Kalyanji rightly talked about Gita Rahasya, one of very powerful things. I've not read it in its original form, but I've read about it. One Gita that I did read a little bit, Mahatma Gandhi is there, then Radha Krishnan, then Swami Vivekananda spoke about it. But the biggest one was Swami Dayananda Saraswati, and then the Shankaracharya of Puri has given a lot of talks. These are the ones that are inspiring me today. There is a particularly telling statement by Vinobaji. He uses the word of Gita as a milk, like a mother's milk, it nourishes me. And this milk as a Gita as a milk metaphor is also found in the Dhyana Shlokam. Sarvopanishado Gavaha Dogda Gopalanandaha Partha Vatsat Sudhir Bhokta Dugdam Gita Mritam Mahad. So Gita is said to be the milk of the Upanishads. So this metaphor is found. So it's a very nourishing thing. And it's the good thing about milk is it's a one-stop food that will nourish you. Even when you're if you're doing upvas, you can take milk, and so it nourishes. Similarly, Gita is a capsule. You don't have to eat a full-fledged meal. You can just drink milk and be done. Similarly, Gita, you don't have to read all the Shastras, just get the milk and be done. But the problem is, what milk you drink is also important. If you drink spoiled milk, you're going to get a stomach upset. So I've had problems. I've read in translations of the Gita, and they confused me more than they inspired me. Why do I say that? Because I just look at the exemplar. If Gita is a great text, we know that by history, because after Gita, Arjuna became the despondent Arjuna, became a fighter Arjuna. He fought, even after his death of his son, he was not shaken down. He fought and won. So he became a victorious person. But the problem is, some Gitas put you down, and I don't want to take names, and you might encounter this. So I'm just giving this as a rule of thumb. So if you were to find a good Gita, one of the dipstick tests I would do is, after the Gita, do you come out like an Arjuna, like a tiger roaring to fight the battle? Are you going to become are you going to go into a slumber and become weak and not fight at all? So does the Gita inspire you to fight? Fight not as in a warriorsman, but fight for your cause. Does it inspire you to action? I think that's a thing. And so then I started systematically investigating, and Kalyanji did allude a lot to the Western universalism. And the problem is, I think a lot of us, and rightly so, when we see Gita, where do we go for Gita? We go into www.youtube or Wikipedia or that and this. And most of the books that are available easy are all being written in the English language, and again, they've been written with a Western universal perspective. Is that right or wrong? I don't know. But maybe it works for, if you come from that tradition, maybe that's all you can make sense of Gita. But I speak to you all as coming from the Indian tradition, somebody who probably has exposure to dharma beyond just an academic world. And Professor Mahadevan rightly observed that maybe India did somewhat better in the pandemic. The mental resilience, some of that is enshrined in us because of our family values, because of our sanskars that comes from our traditions, our society. And in fact, that will be the focus of my last point. How do we institutionalize it? But the fact is, maybe that is the reason we are doing well. We survive the civilizational challenges. But if we don't read the book from the right sampradaya, we'll probably have more confusion than benefits. So I would say we need to seek sampradaya with acharyas. There is also this problem. Those of you who may have read or heard of Rajiv Malhotra, if you have not, again, Google it and read it. He talks about the problem of Sanskrit non-translatable. So can we translate dharma into English? It is not. It's a very imprecise translation. It doesn't capture all the full flavor or the multidimensionality of the term. So, and for us to interpret our own Shastras, we need to have a working knowledge. Again, if you can learn Sanskrit, great. Otherwise, at least having a good knowledge of Hindi. And I know the importance that is given to the Rashtra Bhasha Hindi in the Kurukshetra University, because I've seen the work Professor Sharma and all, they do meticulously compose, communications in public relations in Hindi. So understanding it in the right language, the vernacular, the Indic language system is very important. So having some working knowledge, at least on if you're conversant with what is Pada Shastra, which is grammar, what is Vakya Shastra, the Mimamsa, at least knowing that these things exist is important. The Pramana Shastra, Vedanta, at least be aware of it, listen to the traditional acharyas. That's where you get a lot out of the Gita. And somewhere I think we need to eschew this idea that if somebody is in a dhoti kurta, they may not teach values. I think, and I rightly congratulate people like, Kalyanji is putting this on a map in the US. Professor Mahadevan started teaching it in IIM Bangalore and all. This is all very important because they send the right message that there is a lot of value in Gita. And our traditions. And when we talk of Gita, Gita is a symbol, is actually a symbol for our tradition. It's like the milk, but there is more than Gita. The whole Indian tradition itself is like that. And we all have to be appreciated. We should learn it if possible, great. If not, at least read it in a digest form or listen to it from scholars. So that is a commitment that we all have to make us if we want to keep this tradition alive. Then I kind of come to another thing that I found was, Gita is about, in one of the things in marketing we talked about is, as opposed to a production aspect. In production, it's all about one product, mass production, economies of scale. Whereas in marketing, it's all about creating the individualized product, tailoring the product to your needs, to the customer's needs. At a highest level, it's one-on-one marketing. And Gita is also talking about it. It says basically 3 verses that I have really liked. 3.35, chapter 3, verse 35. Shreyon swadharmo vigunaha paradanman swanushtitat swadharme nidanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavaha. Basically what it says is swadharmo nidanam shreyaha. It is better to do your duty, and that, your swadharma. And then when you go into chapter 18, Sweswe karmanyabhirataha sansiddhim labate naraha swarkarma niratah sansiddhim yata vindati tachruno. And the next verse, Yatah pravritti bhutanam yena sarvamidam tatam swakarmanam tamabhyarcha siddhim vindati manavaha. So swadharma and swakarma, that means doing whatever you do, what you like, what are you are good at, that itself will give you siddhi. You don't have to be in a rat race all the time. You can do what you are doing and win the battle of life. Everybody has a unique position in life, and if they can play to their strengths, that will make you successful. Not everybody has to fight like an Arjuna. Some of you can write very good articles and fight your battle. Some of you can spread the message, through doing your, everyday life. I mean, everybody has a role in the society, and understanding our role in the society helps us play to our strength. So that's another thing. So in case of Arjuna, Krishna knew that his strength was he was a great archer. There's no point in asking him to become a sannyasi. That will not work. For some people, their tradition maybe, they may be great as a farmer. No point in force-fitting them and trying to make them do a degree. And this has been very, very true in the context of the education system. Again, because this is a university platform, I'm an educator and I see a lot of students. I speak to the students here. There has been a lot of talk. There is a lot of good momentum in our country to make Bharat as a Vishwaguru, especially in the post-pandemic world. There's a lot of interest in our tradition on about Ayurveda and yoga. But again, we have to give, but we have to give like a guru. A guru will give it away free, but we'll give it to the right shishya. So we have to give it to the right people in the right state. But at the same time, our own education system has followed for a long time a very, very silo-based education system with the cookie cutter approach. You have 3-4 streams: arts, commerce, science, engineering. Most people go into engineering even though they hate it. The movies like 3 Idiots talk about it because that's the easiest thing. That's a default option. We all like the default option. So Gita is saying, don't use the default option. Create your own option, what you preferred option. Go for a preferred option. So, go outside your comfort zone. So a flexible learning is also needed, and that is where institutions have to play a role. I did allude to the role of institution building because until now, I would argue that a lot of what we know about our tradition does not come primarily from our institutions. It comes from our family, our traditions, our sampradaya gurus. But our institutions also have a role in this. They have to become centers where our wisdom is not only celebrated but is also taught. So programs like what happened in IIM Bangalore, this is needed, but we need more. This Gita Jayanti is great step in the right direction, but we need to create more centers of excellence, more journals, more research papers in this topic. And to that extent, this conference is doing a great work. So, for example, when we talk about one-on-one, there are the Gita talks about the three gunas, the Ayurveda talks about the doshas. So what you eat is not going to be the similar to what your friend can eat, because your doshas dictate what you can eat. So when you talk even for the Annamaya Sharira, the body, for that also you talk about flexibility. So how much flexibility you need for somebody who's at the Manomaya level. You need to think of the right approach. What is their adhikaritva? What is their viveka? What task can they do well? And you have to give them the right educational mix. So basically, learning should become an individual-centric approach, and you have to become an Arjuna. And if you take the spirit of an Arjuna, Noya Swadharma Swakarma, then you go to Sri Krishna not as a god, as a Vishwarupa, in all that miracle. Forget all that. Go to him as a teacher. Use the Gita as a book. Every day you can learn a lesson. Maybe you can, and help you to win your own Kurukshetra. So that is the spirit in which I want to give my message today. So I think I congratulate Kurukshetra University. Again, when we talk of our religion, we talk of Sanatana Dharma, and Sanatana Dharma means Dharma Kshetre, Kurukshetre. So this is the place where I hope we can create new wave of the dharmic centric teaching and research. My special thanks to Professor Tejinder Sharma and all of the team at Kurukshetra University for making this wonderful program happen. It is not only a virtual program, but I hope it turns out to, and I think it is slowly becoming a virtuous program. So, and we hope this tradition continues. With that, namaskar and thank you.